Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man has finished its first season, and we can finally judge it for its entirety. This show was controversial before its release and during its run. Complaints have usually ranged anywhere from designs being bad, the animation looking bad, to it changes too much from the source material, to just simple bad writing. There's all kinds of fun takes. I read through the comics, so I want to examine this show in detail as a show and as an adaptation and see how it fares on both sides. This show was originally supposed to be an MCU-related prequel called Freshman Year, and over time developed into the show we have now that is completely separate from the MCU. This show itself is about young Peter Parker. Doing his first day of high school, Doctor Strange and the symbiote come through a portal literally out of nowhere and fight, and during that fight Spider gets released. That Spider bites Peter Parker and he becomes Spider-Man. We follow him in his early days as he tries to figure out how to be the best hero he can be. He befriends a goth girl named Nico Minoru and Lonnie Lincoln, a jock who's a really good dude. Peter has to balance his high school crushes, friendships, school, friendship, family, and superheroes, and he finds out no matter how hard you try, life comes with pain. This video will include spoilers for the entire season, so be aware of that. I think it's fair to say the pitch of the show is not very interesting. It's another young Spider-Man show, the most oversaturated take on the character. I'd rather have basically anything else, but you do also get Doctor Strange and Venom and Nico from Runaways and Lonnie, and these are people who are not really supposed to be here. That's where this show's fresh takes really comes from, the people around Spider-Man this time around. The show starts out with barely any traditional Spider-Man characters in it, but as it goes on, it gets closer to the status quo we all know. Harry Osborn appears a few episodes into the show and becomes Peter's best friend, as you would expect. Lonnie falls down the criminal life and becomes Tombstone, a villain from the comics. We start out with a nobody villain, seemingly loosely based on the Scorcher from the comics, a very obscure character, but as we go on, Scorpion becomes the big bad. Norman Osborn, Chameleon, Doc Ock, all these traditional villains start popping up. Okay, let's talk about animation. The animation for this show is inspired by Ditko era of comics, but this isn't Ditko's art style. The show has its own look that's softer and more modern. This shows, especially in its designs, where everyone is more modernized to look more like a modern teenager, and the villains have more updated tech. You look at like Nico, like this goth girl, wouldn't fit into the 60s Spider-Man, but you know, fits here. You look at the Scorpion's tail, it's this more modern looking thing. The show is cel-shaded with thick borders around the characters and buildings. Sometimes the show transitions into these comic book panels to show multiple things happening at once, or time passing, or whatever. I really like what they're got going on here, but we have all noticed that this show just straight up looks cheap. It just doesn't have the budget to pull off everything it wants. This show wants to put focus on its characters. This might be the most character heavy show we've gotten on Spider-Man so far, but then there are times where the facial animations and textures can't really deliver on it. Like, look at Aunt May in episode 1. This is just straight up bad. The show keeps going for close-ups, so it's hard to ignore all the missing wrinkles and shadows and just the details on faces. The show does have good animation overall. The fight scenes can be quite good, but although I do feel like they're lacking something, but I can't quite figure it out what. It lacks impact or speed or something soft. Maybe it's motion blur, I don't know. The animation and art style is close, but it's not quite there. The foundation is solid, and there are moments where it comes together really well, but at least it works well enough throughout the show that I can enjoy the show, but I think the team has to step up their game for future seasons. I hope they deliver, because I believe this could be one of the best looking Spider-Man shows if they just push it to that next level. What really helps it work in the end just well enough is cinematography. I love the cinematography in the show. There are some good looking shots in the show. The 3D Dyalla seems to be shot like you'd shoot live action scene, so you get some great shots that you wouldn't find in the 2D shows that came before, and I really find the visuals to be at times downright fantastic. I think it's an underrated part, and it's like, I think some people are missing parts of the great visuals, because there is a lot of good here. It's got more going on for it than just a lack of details. Something that allows the show to hit hard is its rating. This show is rated higher than other Spider-Man shows, and this show uses that H rating very effectively. Like, it's very purposeful. I was left shocked quite a few times in this season. At first, it begins with a few mild curses, which is like, okay, that's unexpected. But then we get blood, and it's like, okay, this kind of goes hard. And then we get this. Dude. Dude. I kind kind of like the designs for the characters themselves. The designs, I think, are good modernizations of the characters. Like I talked about Nico being like a modern teenager, and that's an element that all these characters have, that they look, I don't know, coming from today. But let's take Harry as our example, one of the more controversial characters as far as I understand. This Harry wears a green suit. His Osborne hair is in a bun, he wears jewelry, most noticeably his earrings, and a smartwatch. He's also, you know, a pretty handsome dude, not gonna lie. Harry's character in the comics doesn't have designated clothing he's supposed to wear, but usually he wears something that looks expensive, at least to me. Like, I don't know, I wasn't around in the 60s or 70s. I got the impression that he dresses rich, but I don't know, maybe he's a broke boy. He has his Osborne hair, just short, and truth be told, he's a little ugly. At a quick glance, the new Harry might not look like the old one. At least I was shocked when I saw this Harry. I was like, yeah, that doesn't look like Harry, but looking closer, I don't know, he's quite dead set for Harry. He dresses rich, but just modern rich with a suit and expensive accessories. He's got the hair just in a modern hairstyle. The biggest difference is that this Harry is handsome, but even that I think is quite justified. Then John Romita and Stan Lee took over the book, and these two redeemed Harry. He makes up with Peter like immediately, and they become best friends. The status quo everybody knows. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is Romita era Harry specifically, modernized. We skipped the Ditko era, but then again, I wouldn't consider Ditko's Harry to be crucial for his character. I love Ditko run, but it isn't what people think of Harry as usually, and Ditko doesn't do a lot with Harry, so I think that's completely fine choice to do. Romita era Harry, adapted as a handsome, semi-charismatic dude, makes sense. I would go as far as to say this has the potential to be one of the best takes on the character if it all goes well. Harry's now is a social media celebrity here, but again, that comes down to modernization. It makes sense for a rich kid like him. Harry's especially somebody who is desperate for love. You know, the hollow love he gets from social media plays into that character. It's all very much classic Harry, and specifically Romita Harry, and then Conway Harry probably later on. And this kind of thinking is there in all the characters. Like you have the Scorpion, who again is like a more modernized tech look with modern armors. Even like this Ditko mask is adapted as a helmet. This is Scorpion. Like it's actually a pretty cool design. Like a little stupid that his arms are exposed, but you know, it looks cool at least. Despite all the controversies, I think the show proves in the end that these are very much good takes on the character. Everybody except Peter. Peter sucks, but you know, like everybody else, I think do a really good job. Some characters stay even more true to the classic appearances. Like Doc Ock is straight up from the comics. Like I'm not sure if anything has been changed. Well, not from the comics, I guess. I'm not sure if it originates the comics or in the 90s animated series, but that classic look that I think a lot of us think of as his kind of most iconic look. Overall, I really like these designs. They work well for the show itself and the story it's telling. They work well as adaptations, I think, as well. Spider-Man starts out with a homemade costume, tries out a few toy commercials before settling into his classic red and blue costume. It's one of these give everything an origin story type deals, like where instead of Peter just getting his costume like he normally does, it's treated like a big deal and there's this lot more meaning to it. It gives the same vibe as finding out like the origin of Han Solo's name or his jacket or the dice or even the Millennium Falcon or his friendship with Chewie. It's not necessarily bad. Once Peter's grown enough, changing into the Spider-Man costume visually signifies his growth from a clueless child into someone who needs Norman's help, and eventually finally into the proper hero we know and love as Spider-Man. It's up to you how much you care for that stuff. I personally really don't care for it, but it's not bad itself. It's fine storytelling. It's just, to me, I just kind of really am starting to dislike this origin arc where he learns to work alone. Like, it feels backwards to me. Like, he starts out on top and works his way down. Like, it's just like, he learns that his suit with the gadgets is not as good as spandex. Like, come on now. The only reason we're doing this and why this specific costume is treated like this is the right one is because this is the status quo of the character. This is what you expect. Like, do we really need an explanation why the working class hero doesn't have expensive stuff? Like, do we need an origin for the red and blue costume? Like, why can't he just have it? Like, it comes across like explaining Han Solo's jacket or Millennium Falcon. I feel like it would just, at this point, I'd rather just him get the costume and we move on. Would Star Wars be better if episode 4 was focused on Luke's shirt? Like, yeah, I guess an iconic part of the character. but it just doesn't feel very natural. It's been done before and it's getting a little annoying. You can feel that this costume is iconic and that's why it is important here. It feels like it's motivated by things outside the work than the work itself. Again, it's fine storytelling because it represents his growth, but I don't know, I'm not feeling it. Also, the constant connection to billionaires is really awkward for the average Joe superhero. Spider-Man is us. He's meant to be relatable, so why are we putting him in the 1%? It's really eerie, and I'll be honest, it's starting to feel really dirty to me. Why isn't working class enough? Like, Spider-Man was a story about nobody making his mark. But now it's like, oh, well, he needs a billionaire to learn that lesson. I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there's a really weird obsession with rich people going on, and it's starting to make me uncomfortable, and I want it gone. Him learning he doesn't need billionaires, and he could have billionaires helps, it's just like, that takes away from it. Like, I'm not broke because I rejected billionaires. Like, I'm broke because, you know, that's how life works out for most of us. It feels like a rich person writing a story, you know? It's just, I really don't like it. An important question to ask with all the changes is if this new take is as interesting as the old one or even better. If not, why are we bothering? This is my core issue with this take on Peter. He just fundamentally is more generic, taking more from the countless Superman-inspired superheroes, turning the character who broke the mold into the mold. Different itself is not necessarily good to me, and I won't praise things for being just different by default. You can take on May and make her, I don't know, Grandma Bay, but does that make it more interesting? She has a different name? No. Is that more engaging? No. Does that bring anything to the table? No. Changes for the change's sake is not praiseworthy itself, nor fresh, nor interesting. It can be even distracting, annoying, or even detrimental if you're not careful. Spider-Man is about overcoming yourself. Without that, it's not Spider-Man. This is not about Uncle Ben. I don't want to see Uncle Ben, honestly. I'm tired of that story as much as anybody else, but it's about Spider-Man's selfishness. All Spider-Man runs have told this story without Uncle Ben. It's not a thing where it's like, oh, this has gotten old or we just want the same stories. Spider-Man's story at its core is about selfishness. Somebody who isn't a hero doing the heroic thing. There is an infinite amount of stories you can tell about this kind of story. Story is not plot. This Peter Parker is just kind of generic. It's just more Superman-like. It's more like every other superhero. Invincible is literally doing the same character, but more interesting right now. I dislike how this Peter talks. I don't like how he acts. I don't like how he thinks. Overall, I stand by it. I said it, I think, in my first video. Some people argued it, but I stand by it. This is one of the most boring takes on Peter Parker I've ever seen. And I stand by that judgment. One of the things I really like about this show, it takes time to build Peter's supporting cast. This is something that's the norm for the comic, and it's one of its strengths. I would argue any good Spider-Man lives and dies by his supporting cast. Loved ones are the thing that ground him. I am worried this show gives entire episodes that are mostly really the standout feature is Nico and Harry, for example, just talking, just hanging out and getting through their differences, having little arcs, and you know, that's what makes you care about it. Makes this feel real, like something that I can connect with. I've had arguments, I've had to sit there in awkward silence with people, so it's this kind of a thing where it's like I can be like, that's literally me. That's what relatable means. I am worried though if this supporting cast is Nico, who is a witch, Harry, who's going to be a goblin, the super geniuses, everyone's a super genius, and it's like a huge chunk of the characters who are possibly maybe gonna appear later are tied to superhero stuff. So I am afraid this show has a potential to lose its heart. If everyone's a superhero or connected to that stuff, Spider-Man will no longer be relatable. This is a problem in modern Spider-Man comics, arguably, and even some of the adaptations. You need regular people there. You need people who do not even know about that stuff, and nor do they care. And I hope that the show doesn't lose sight of that. The best Spider-Man runs are things like Stan Lee, Roger Stern, and like these runs where not everything is super. Like that is easy for plot. Plot should not override the characters. You need the grounding, and I don't know, it's the show so far does a fantastic job at that, but it could lose that in the future seasons, so I'm a little worried. This grounding is a great example why Peter's parents are absolutely horrible in the comics. And this show has one of the wildest cliffhangers I think I've ever seen. They show Peter Parker's dad alive in prison, which is, like, I don't even know what to say. It feels wild. I have no idea what they're doing. It's meant to be a tease for season 2, but I don't know. Peter's family lore is one of the worst parts of the character. And everyone just kind of ignores them because it is kind of trash. It's just they're like super spies or something, working for SHIELD, going around world or something, or they're like scientists who die dramatically, or it's just like convoluted and just never added anything good to the series. At best, it's like Ultimate Spider-Man, but it's never particularly great. So, showing me Peter's dad doesn't make me excited. It feels like a threat. Say nice things about the show or else. It's like, what are we doing here? But admittedly, this is one of the most unused parts of Peter Parker's lore for a good reason, but I have no idea what they're doing here. It's honestly one of the things I'm most curious about. Where are you going with this? Like, I hope it's going to be something good. Historically speaking, it's not going to go anywhere good. Definitely curious. This is generally a funny show. I love the humor in the show. It's like generally made me a little chuckle quite a few times, very consistently. I love the fact that the show takes its time to set everything up. It's like it could rush through everything. It doesn't exactly have a whole lot of episodes, only 10 per season, but it kind of does the maybe possibly a riskier thing for a kids show and spends a lot of time with characters just talking. And I think it pays off big time. This is the best kind of content from the show, and I love that. And I really want to talk about the music quickly. I think this show has really great music. I think the intro bangs, I think it's a great intro. Those things disappear for a while, and it's just nice to have a really great one. It has great visuals. I think it's very fun and creative. It's very fun to watch every time. And the music, this intro song itself, really has grown on me. But it's not just the intro, it's like beyond that. There are moments where I think the songs themselves really elevate scenes, and I think there are some really fun, mixing going on. Like there's like the one fight scene where like the Spider-Man is fighting Scorpion, and we go inside a building, and the sound becomes muffled because we're inside the building watching the fight going on outside. It's really fun and creative, and I think the audio side of this show absolutely nails it. And I think this is where, I think it's fair to say, there's a lot of conversation about this show, and I think there is something that is worth noting about that conversation. This show can be judged three ways: as an adaptation, how it takes Spider-Man's characters and his stories and how well it realizes their essence. It can be judged as a fan, what it's like to watch as a show as a fan, like how does it do fan service, how do you get those surprises and those aha moments without necessarily worrying as much about the essence and the story itself. And it can be judged as a show, ignoring any obligations to previous works, to fans, new audiences, and just how does it work as a story, how coherent are the plots, if the characters' actions make sense, and all of this kind of stuff. I think this is some of the reason for the divide in the conversations. People tend to approach it from different angles, and that can lead to people saying literally the same exact thing and coming to a different conclusion, whether it's positive or negative. A perfect example of this is Peter Parker. I absolutely despise this take as an adaptation, and as a fan, it fails to understand what makes Spider-Man different, and to me, Peter's selfishness is inherently part of his essence. Without that, you do not have Peter Parker. And we've had multiple versions that do this now, so this is my red line. I can definitely say this. I cannot accept this. I hate it. But to another person, like everything that I hate about this Peter, it might be the reason why they like it. Peter is a coherent character. A little generic, but it makes sense more or less, so people like him for all the same reasons I hate him. Neither opinion is necessarily wrong. It comes down to what you want. I personally find this to be a really good show. I don't particularly love it yet. I think there's some glaring issues that I can't look past, and I hope the team doesn't dismiss all the criticisms and actually listens and improves on this show. But so far, I think there are some major hindrances, and I can see certain traps it might walk upon it later that will bring it all down. We haven't had a good Spider-Man show in a long time, so it's like, I'll take it, definitely. I hate Spider-Verse so much.